front of me.
Well, I know it is, but they can't read it from over here.
Then no, sir. It'll just be right there on the podium.
Okay, I'm gonna start the thing off. It'll be Wicker, Thune, Hoban, Cornyn, Scott, Kramer, Fisher, Sullivan, Blackburn, Tillis, Young, and Tupper.
You're just leave it up there. That way they can all look at it.
Okay, let's do that. All right, you guys, this is significant. We'll have all the members of the Senate Armed Services Committee here, along with others. I know that Senators Thune, Young, Cornyn, and Hovan, and probably others who are not on the committee will also be here. I just want to make the comment. I don't have to remind everyone that we're in I believe, the most endangered position our country has ever been in terms of what China has demonstrated clearly, what they have the capability of doing. The same thing with Russia, North Korea, Iran, and I think we all understand that it's not just members of the committee that our top priority is national security. And that's what the NDAA is. The NDAA is, you've heard me say many times, I really believe the most important bill we do every year. It's we've done it now for the past 60 years. Now, I'm older than these guys are all young. I'm old. I understand that. And I have been in on one half of the 60 years of these bills that we've had. And so bring up this bill is no brainer. The major message we need to send is to Senator Schumer. I have no idea why we don't have floor time now. It's to everyone's benefit, to his benefit, and the alternative of that is to do the Big Four. I've done more Big Fours, I think, than anyone else who's serving now, and all that does is shut out a lot of people. And we want to open it up. We want to give everyone a chance to participate in this, and the best way to do that is to get it on the floor, and that's why we're here today. So we'll hear from our members along with others that are not on the committee, starting with Roger Wicker.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe, and Senator Inhofe has been doing a wonderful job working with our chairman, Jack Reed. And let me take a moment to say something bipartisan about the NDAA. Yes, it's been done for 60 straight years, and it's always been done on a bipartisan basis. The chair and the ranking member, those positions go back and forth, but we come out with a product and we make a statement for the defense of the United States of America. Let me also quote the President of the United States, a Democrat who said we're at a great inflection point in history. Let me quote the Secretary of Defense. China is our pacing challenge. The most significant military threat we have is China. And Colin Kahl, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, again says China is the #1 pacing challenge. So I appreciate the work that Chairman Inhofe and Chairman Reed have done. I appreciate the words of alarm and caution from members of this administration. What we need now is for the Democratic leader of the United States Senate to let this bipartisan process work as it has now for over half a century. And we call on Chuck Schumer today to give us floor time. Let the 100 members of the Senate act on one of the most significant pieces of legislation that we will consider this Congress.
I'm a member of the Defense Appropriations Committee, and so I wanted to come here and lend my support to the authorizers as well. It's very important that we get this NDAA bill up for consideration. Our men and women in uniform support and defend us every day, defend our nation. We need to support them, and we support them by passing the NDAA, and also by making sure that in the Defense Appropriation Bill we have parity between what we spend on our military and what we spend on non-defense discretionary spending. I mean, this is how we show strength to our adversaries. And I would submit to you that it's a very, very important time to show strength to our adversaries, whether it's China or Russia, whether it's Iran, whether it's North Korea. we need to stand strong. We stand strong by supporting our military. And we need to make those investments in our men and women and in all of the systems that give us that technological advantage. And what I want to really emphasize is our nuclear deterrence. In this NDAA, as well as defense programs, we're working very hard to modernize our nuclear triad, submarines, bombers, and ICBM missiles. And we've got to maintain that advantage on our adversaries. Some people say, oh, well, you know, we can just do this with conventional forces. That's not the case. Nobody can ever think that they can challenge us in terms of our nuclear surety. That is the bedrock. That is the foundation on which supports our conventional forces. So again, this is about making sure nobody is ever the least bit confused that they can challenge the United States in terms of our military forces. Our role is to make sure that we take up the NDAA and that we pass it, that we support our men and women, that we make sure they have the tools they need to get the job done for the American people, and that's what we're calling for today. Senator Cornyn's next.
Well, Democrats in Washington have been so preoccupied with passing their reckless tax and spending spree that they have overlooked and ignored some of the basic responsibilities of governing, like defending the country. And right now, we are on track to have one of the latest Senate considerations of the National Defense Authorization Act in history. The bill was marked up by the Senate Armed Services Committee in July. It's been ready for action for some very long time, and yet here we are voting on low-level nominees and arguing about this tax and spending spree that the Democrats seem obsessed with passing. You can't make this kind of stuff up. China is testing supersonic missiles, and we are here in Washington talking about things like so-called tree equity. It is just it's an incredible lack of responsibility when it comes to addressing the issues that are so important to our country's national security. And we can't afford to wait any longer to deal with it. I would just say in my state of South Dakota, we're preparing for the B-21 bomber mission. And obviously with that comes lots of critical funding to prepare for it, developing the B-21, starting to transform Ellsworth Air Force Base to prepare for the mission. And if you want to counter China's aggressive military investments, a credible deterrent like the future B-21 bomber is the way to do it. The United States is one of only 3 countries in the world that operates a strategic bomber. The other 2 are Russia and China. And I've always said, and I firmly believe this, that if you don't get national security right, the rest is conversation. And unfortunately, the conversation in Washington right now is so out of touch that it's hard to comprehend. I'm urging my colleagues on the other side, the Senate Democrats, to abandon this socialist spending spree and to get down to focusing on the needs of the country, starting with providing for our national defense.
There is nothing that we do here in Congress that's more important than the National Defense Authorization Act and supporting our men and women in the military and providing for our common defense. There is nothing more important, which is why you see this disconnect between these relatively low-level nominations that Senator Schumer's been scheduling rather than the most important piece of legislation we can and should be considering. If you just look around the world, you see China threatening to invade Taiwan, blockading the South China Sea. That's their aspiration. You see Kim Jong-un shooting rockets off with the nuclear capabilities. You see Russia building its nuclear arsenal and supporting terrorist and other activities in places like Syria, threatening to invade Ukraine. You see, as a result of the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan, you see Al-Qaeda and ISIS reconstituting themselves while the Taliban is running the country. how in the world that Senator Schumer and Senate Democrats can think that confirming relatively low-level nominations rather than dealing with our national security and these threats to our security are beyond me. And I'll just close by saying none of us want military conflict, but Ronald Reagan said it perhaps best when he said, peace through strength. As Senator Hoeven and others have mentioned, we want to make sure nobody is confused, nobody miscalculates, nobody misjudges in terms of our commitment to protect the United States of America and the American people and our friends and allies around the world. We can send that message by taking up the National Defense Authorization Act as soon as possible, rather than dilly-dallying on other relatively inconsequential matters. Senator Scott.
You know, I'm a business guy, and in business what you do is you always remember the main thing is the main thing. The main thing for a federal government is to defend the freedoms of this country. The main thing is to make sure we have a military that nobody ever wants to question our superiority. So what Senator Schumer is doing now, while he watches what Communist China is doing, what North Korea is doing, what Russia is doing, what Iran's doing, he doesn't want to bring it to the floor. He wants to spend his time on social reengineering. So we have got to understand that we have enemies. We have enemies that don't like the freedoms of this country. So we've got to stand up and make sure we get this done. We need to have time where all of us are involved, not just a few people at the end. We're all involved to make sure we get the Defense Authorization Act done now. On top of that, we've got to figure out what happened in Afghanistan. I think we ought to have a bipartisan select committee, the House and the Senate, and understand exactly what happened with this withdrawal, so we Americans will know exactly why Americans died right there and why so many Americans were left.
Well, the bottom line is we're running out of time. And when I say running out of time, I don't mean we're coming up on Thanksgiving and we haven't taken up the NDAA. I mean we're running out of time to continue to be the superpower of the world, to be competitive with our now, as we call them, near-peer adversaries. China's not waiting for us to get our act together. It's been referenced, Senator Hoeven brought up the modernization of the nuclear deterrent. It's the highest priority of the national defense strategy. That's the strategy we go by when we set the priorities for our national defense. And as it's also been said, providing for national defense is the federal government's highest priority. And yet the federal government today, at least the Democratic leadership in the federal government, seems to be more interested in expanding the role of the federal government rather than focusing on the priorities of the federal government as identified in the Constitution and in the great traditions. So as we try to keep up, as we try to stay ahead, we watch hypersonic missiles that actually circumvent the entire globe. Imagine. Who knew that was possible? We didn't. We identify more ground-based missiles in China. Who knew that they were building out that fast? Well, we probably didn't and should. But we have to stay ahead. Because guess what? The type of weapon systems that China and Russia and others are developing and testing and building are the type of weapon systems that we need to have more of to make sure that none of them ever get used. We're the deterrent in the free world. And we need to be about the business of getting this NDAA on the floor, debating it, amending it, hearing from the entire team to make sure that the world knows that the United States of America is still prepared to be the #1 superpower in the world, not to win wars, but mainly to defend and to maintain peace.
For 60 years, Congress has passed the NDAA, and we come together in a bipartisan way with input from Republicans and Democrats on the Senate Armed Services Committee in order to do this. This is something that all of us should be proud of, not just here in the United States Senate, but we should be proud of that as a country, that we continue to place the priority on our men and women in uniform and also on the resources that they need in order to really carry out the missions that they are given. This has gotten dangerous that we are not able to see the NDAA come to the floor of the United States Senate. That decision is made by one individual, and that is Senator Schumer, who is the majority leader. He sets the agenda. And we are running out of time. As one of my colleagues said, we're not just running out of time to get this passed, but we're running out of time to keep things on schedule. We're running out of time to show the people of this country that we are committed to the number one responsibility we have as members of Congress, and that is to defend this nation. I always encourage people in the Department of Defense, our combatant commanders, to talk about more easily to talk about the threats that we face as a country. We need to declassify some of that material so that our people in this country understand those threats that we face. So when we are reading articles about silos being built in China, and those silos are capable of holding ICBMs, when we read stories about the hypersonic capabilities that the Chinese may have exhibited in those public stories that have come out, when we look at the force buildups that our adversaries are doing and the missile tests that they're carrying out, that all leads up to aggressive behavior. And the people of this country have a right to know what those threats are. If we're going to be able to meet them, we have to continue to authorize what's needed. And we did that in the Senate Armed Services Committee, again, in a bipartisan way. Many things were passed by voice vote. So we need to be able to do that. I think any delay by Senator Schumer really shows a lack of prioritization for this country's defense, but it also shows a lack of seriousness about those threats that we're facing. Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Deb. You know, like many of the senators up here, I'm part of the Armed Services Committee. I'm proud of the bipartisan tradition on that committee. But I want to talk about the dereliction of duty with regard to the Democratic leadership in D.C. and our military. The leadership of the Democratic Party on the Hill in the White House, think about it, Speaker Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders, President Biden, all come from the anti-military Vietnam era, and it shows. Why? Because their actions consistently prioritize the interests of our military last, dead last. Let me provide 3 examples. First, this anti-military Democratic Party leadership is always, and I mean always, when they get in power, focused on one thing: cutting our military and cutting readiness. Think about it. Second term of the Obama administration, defense spending was cut by 25%. Readiness plummeted. Last year, you may have remembered the Bernie Sanders op-ed in Politico magazine. This is it. Defund the Pentagon, the liberal case. I guess defunding the police was not enough for now the chairman of the Budget Committee. This was 14% across the board cuts he wanted for the Defense Department. Chuck Schumer tweeted, "I proudly support the Sanders defund the military amendment." Fortunately, we beat it on a floor vote last year. And now that they're in power, look at that chart. Look at that chart. That's the Biden budget, dead last. Triple-digit, double-digit increases for every federal agency, $6 trillion blowout budget for the federal government, but Homeland Security and the Department of Defense get cuts. So these are just the facts. Let me give you 2 other areas where there's a dereliction of duty from Democratic leadership as it relates to the military. You're hearing it right here. Chuck Schumer won't bring up the NDAA. Bipartisan bill, won't bring it to the floor. Why? I don't know. Maybe you guys can ask him. And one final one, really important, sounds minor. The vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has to retire by statute in less than 3 weeks. Okay? That's a really important position. The White House has not sent up any nominees to replace General Hyten. None. So almost certainly we're going to have an absent vice chairman at a time when the chairman's been under some criticism and they're not doing a darn thing about it. Where is that nomination? Again, dereliction of duty in so many ways from the National Democratic leadership in this town as it relates to our military. And this is not where the American people are. They support our military. They don't put it dead last like Biden, Schumer, and Sanders are doing.
I so appreciate being able to hear Dan Sullivan talk about the U.S. military. His love of the military always shows. And it's important to us in Tennessee. And as he said, why is it that Chuck Schumer is not bringing this bill forward? The reason is because it is not a priority for him. And it is not a priority for the Democrat Party. They would rather be talking about climate change and social programs than fulfilling a constitutional duty and providing for the common defense. There's a lot that we have to be keeping our eye on. Let me touch on just a couple of things. First of all, China. And as we look at great power competition and what this is doing to us, to our readiness, to our ability for 21st century warfare. And there's a lot of conversation around hypersonics. And right now, much of the testing that we can do and have the ability to do on hypersonics is located in Tennessee at Arnold Engineering Development Center. That's where we have wind tunnels. That is where we have the capacity. And funding for this testing is included in the NDAA. Also, we can look at what China is doing to Taiwan and how important it is for us to send the message that we stand with Taiwan as they push back on China. Our allies need to know that we are with them, and our enemies need to know that they should be fearing us. And those are important messages to send. Now, China is joined in the axis of evil by Russia, and you can look at Russia's aggression right now, the way that they are pushing troops back into the Ukraine, the way that they're conducting exercises as they have not conducted them in the past 4 decades. This is their aggressiveness. Why are they doing this? Because the Democrats are not interested in national defense. That's the message they're sending. And our president is more interested in climate change than he is in national defense. Russia and China are joined by Iran in the axis of evil. And we know that they have carried out that drone strike in Syria. They're also joined by North Korea. And look at what they are doing with long-range missile testing. Now, the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disaster. It was an embarrassment. Everyone admits that. And our military needs to know that the United States has their back and that we are going to be there with them. And it's one of the reasons to pass this NDAA.
Shortly after the reports of the Chinese hypersonic missile test success, we had a top general say that it was a near Sputnik moment. We know that China has a quantitative advantage over the United States, and now they're gaining on what the United States has as a qualitative advantage. There are a lot of authorizations in the NDAA that will counter that threat, and the American people need to know that it's a real threat. But I also want to talk about, I've served on the Personnel Subcommittee for 6.5 years. I've observed 7 straight bipartisan NDAs go to the floor and get passed out. I've also observed a lot of progress for military families. Every day that Chuck Schumer delays this bill on the floor is another day military families are going to wonder whether or not they're going to get a pay raise. I don't know if you've noticed, but inflation's up there. Look at how much it costs to fill your gas tank. We need to provide those families the certainty that they're going to be able to make ends meet. Every day that Chuck Schumer delays the NDA is a delay in progress for our education system that's run by the DOD that thousands of our children go to. Every day that Chuck Schumer delays the NDAA is a delay on improving our health care system for military families and our men and women in uniform. And every day that he delays the NDAA, we're going to continue to have families in unsafe housing that we have to make progress on the basis. Chuck Schumer needs to understand that these nominations may be important, but they're not as important as the futures of the men and women serving in military and our future ability to counter Chinese and other threats. He needs to bring this bill to the floor and do like we've done for the last 60 years, move on and show some leadership.
Now is an incredibly dangerous time for the American people and our allies. We have a weakened posture vis-a-vis Iran. We had a botched exit from Afghanistan. Chinese Communist Party continues its sorties and various forms of aggression against Taiwan. And we have yet to pass a national defense authorizing bill. This is the latest I can remember we've ever waited amidst this incredibly dangerous atmosphere. So what's the Democratic leadership focused on? A multi-trillion-dollar tax and spend boondoggle that funds things like tree equity and electric charging stations for wealthy Americans. It's absolutely absurd, and it's incredibly irresponsible. The Chinese Communist Party just launched a hypersonic vehicle around the world. They have potential to put nuclear weapons on these hypersonic vehicles. And we have a couple of pieces of legislation. The U.S. ICA that passed out of the United States Senate with roughly 70 bipartisan votes that makes extensive investments in hypersonic and quantum computing and artificial intelligence, all of which can help us defeat that threat and deter it in the future. And the National Defense Authorization Act, which makes its own key investments in our men and women in uniform, ensuring they never have to fight a fair fight. But the Democratic leadership hasn't prioritized national defense. This is the most fundamental responsibility of our federal government. It's time that the Democrats show some leadership. It's time that they step up and work with Republicans to pass this NDAA and put aside this multi-trillion-dollar tax and spend, left-wing ideological wish list that they're trying to ram through an equally divided United States Senate. The American people have had enough.
That's good. Now, we've saved the best to last. Coach, you're on.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. I'm new here, and the Armed Services Committee is probably the most bipartisan. We work hard. We worked all year long on the NDAA. We've all give and take over the last 8-9 months. It's gone through the House. It's got back to the Senate. But I just call it hypocrisy. How can you support our troops or say you support our troops and you don't authorize the budget? It makes no sense. We can walk, hopefully we can walk and chew gum at the same time in the Senate. We can do more than one thing, but they're focused on one thing for some reason on the left. They care nothing about national defense. It's obvious. They care nothing about our military. It's obvious. But we need to step up to the plate. China, in the last 10 years, has increased their military budget $200 billion. United States of America in the last 10 years has decreased our military budget $400 billion. We had better wake up. We build the hypersonic missile in Alabama, most of it. It's under the developmental stages as we speak in Huntsville. We have 5,000 defense contractors. And what are they having to do? They're having to vaccine mandate. They're having to fight it every day to be able to go to work and put this missile together, defense and offensive missile. And that's a shame, absolute shame. So the old cliche is we better not wake up and smell the roses. We better wake up and smell hypersonic missiles, because that's a huge problem coming our way from China and Russia. Thank you.
I think the main thing to take away from here is that when you ask the question, why are we not getting floor time, there's not an answer. I haven't heard one this morning. No one's given one. And yet, by not doing this, the only ones who are punished are the Democrats and Republicans who are on the committee and off the committee, being deprived of the opportunity to participate in what I characterized at the beginning of this as the most significant piece of legislation that we consider every year. So we're down to a few people here, but we'll open it up to questions.
Senator Inhofe?
Yes.
What does Senator Reid say about this? Have you spoken to him about trying to reach out to the leader?
Oh, yeah, and I neglected on openers. I should have mentioned that in the years that I've been here, I've never worked closer with a Democrat than Reid. I just can't tell you how appreciative I am of keeping this as nonpartisan as it is today. I have talked to him on a daily basis. He has told me that on a daily basis he approaches his leader, and he has not been successful in getting it done. He's done everything that he can do, and he did not come back with a reason that this postponement has taken place.
Real quick, since the vice chairman job was mentioned, can you just confirm that Admiral Chris Grady was indeed nominated last night to be vice chairman?
If he was nominated last night, I was not attentive.
Can I make a point on that, though?
Yeah, sure.
So my understanding is the White House has had names since January. You might want to ask him. January. And if we got it last night, that's news to me. I've been tracking this very closely. But if we got it, it's still very unlikely in terms of meetings, in terms of hearings, in terms of floor time. This will be a vote that we want to take on the floor, that we're going to get this done in the proper amount of time without having a gap. And why on earth would you have a dereliction of duty approach to a very simple issue, put forward the vice chairman nominee before there's a gap? Again, it goes to this broader theme, which is the military in this White House and in this Congress is simply not prioritized. It's an afterthought on the budget. It's an afterthought on nominees. And I would say to the earlier question, it's certainly not the position held by most senators on the Armed Services Committee, like Chairman Reid, who we all have a great relationship with, and I know was very concerned about the lack of any nominees for the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Pretty important job, and we're almost certainly going to have a gap in that position, which does not help the national security of the country at all, and is an unforced error or maybe just more neglect, because they've had names since they walked into the White House 10 months ago.
Senator Tuberville brought up the vaccine mandate. What do you think should happen to active duty service members who don't comply by December?
Well, first of all, I didn't agree with this thing to start with. The fact that, and it did irreparable damage by making